The regular session of the Planning Commission of the City of Lancaster will please come to order. Tonight, our invocator is Pastor Odu from the Redeemer Christian Church, and the pledge will be led by Commissioner Molly. If you'd all please stand. Pastor.
Good evening, everybody. I would like to read briefly from the book of Timothy, where the Word of God says in the 2nd chapter that I exhort therefore that first of all supplications, prayers, intercessions, and giving of thanks be made for all men, for kings and for all that are in authority, that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and honesty. For this is good and acceptable in the sight of God our Savior, who will have all men to be saved and to come unto the knowledge of the truth. I believe our councilmen, our people in the Planning Commission, and everyone that work in our city require the prayer of the people that they lead. So I pray, Father, in the name of Jesus, that you will lead our men and women that you have positioned to lead the people of Lancaster as they deliberate on several matters relating to the governance of our people. I pray, Father, in the name of Jesus, that you will guide them, you will direct their paths tonight, and help them in their deliberation tonight. In Jesus' name we pray. And everybody say, Amen.
Amen.
God bless you all.
Thank you, Pastor.
Please put your right hand on your heart and join me for pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. May I have the roll call, please?
Commissioners Diana Cook. Present. Cassandra Harvey. Absent. Raj Mali.
Here.
Fabian Teresiano.
Here.
Vice Chair Randy Hall.
Here.
And Chairman James Bowes.
Here.
We have a quorum.
We're good. I'm going to take about a 2-minute recess before we start with public comments. Public business from the floor. If an individual is unable to stay through the entire meeting, 10 minutes is granted at this time, which input may be given regarding agenda items. If we have early speakers, they would be limited to 2 minutes each. Do we have any early speakers?
None indicated, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Therefore, any person who would like to address the Planning Commission on any agendized item is requested to complete a speaker's card for the recording secretary and identify the agenda item you'd like to discuss. Each person will be given an opportunity to address the Planning Commission at the time such item is discussed by the Commission. Speaker cards are available at the rear of the chambers, and you'd want to deposit them on your right, our left, next to Deputy City Attorney Mr. Adams. We've received a number of pieces of correspondence to our agenda tonight, and for the record, just so you folks know, there was an added or an amendment to the item number 2, conditional use permit 0608, which is a request for extension. On item number 4, staff report revised. And item number 5, we received today by email and hard copy comments on the initial study. Additionally, we've received uncontested hearing letters on item number 2, on item number 3, on item number 4, and item number 5 from the applicants or their representatives. All right, then, the first item of business is our consent calendar, which is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of June 17, 2013. I have a motion, please.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes from the regular meeting of June 17, 2013.
Thank you.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Please vote.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. The next items are new public hearings. The first one is a public hearing on conditional use permit number 0608, which is a request for extension by the Lane Family Trust. So, without objection, the public hearing is open on this matter. And as I mentioned previously, we have received an uncontested letter. However, there may well be questions from the members. Just for the public's knowledge and so you all understand, this commission meets 2 times a month. Normally we meet a week prior to the regular meeting, where staff briefs us as a group on the upcoming agenda items. We do not deliberate, however, but we do receive input, and we do ask our questions at that time. So often a number of the questions that you might typically think we should be talking about here this evening, we've already had input from staff, and quite often a lot of our questions are answered, but certainly not all. At any rate, public hearing is open, and may we have the staff report, please.
Good evening, Chairman Bose, Commissioners. This is the request for extension for CUP number 06-08. It's a CUP for a construction of a commercial shopping center on the southeast corner of 60th Street West and Avenue L. It's a 40-acre site. This shopping center was originally approved back in 2009. In 2011, they requested a 1-year extension, which was approved for 1 year. In 2012, the same action occurred, and this request for extension would be the 3rd request for extension, which would grant the CUP an extension into September of 2014. So the current expiration date, September 11, 2013, the request is for 2014. There are a few modifications to the conditions of approval. We've added a condition number 72, which is the condition that talks about indemnification and hold harmless. There's also a modification to what was the standard condition number 2, and it's added as condition number 73. This is the condition that talks about the expiration of the CUP. It talks about how it must be used within 2 years from the date of approval. The difference between this modified condition and the original standard condition is that there's added language that talks about how the CUP may be extended to be coterminous with the expiration date of a tentative map approved for the project, provided that such extension is permitted by the applicable provisions of the Lancaster Municipal Code, and that the approval of the tentative map occurs prior to the expiration date of the CUP. And the conditions of approval for the tentative map expressly state that the expiration date of the tentative map and conditional use permit shall be coterminous. So, in essence, what that modification allows for is for the applicant to submit a tentative map in conjunction with the CUP, which may permit for, it would allow for the CUP to continue beyond the typical expiration for the 2-year expiration with the 3 additional extensions that's permitted. And that concludes staff's report. We'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
We may have some. Thank you. So, putting it in my language, this is the last extension of the conditional use permit, and if the applicant chooses to file a parcel map or a tentative tract map prior to, and have it approved prior to, assuming our approval tonight, prior to September 11, 2014, then the parcel map or tract map would give entitlement and continue the life of the conditional use permit. That's my language.
Yes, with the conditions as stated in the modification of the condition that talks about how the map shall expressly state that the expiration date shall be coterminous with CUP.
But no map's ever been filed on this project.
No.
Had it been, we might not even be hearing this tonight.
Right.
All right. Anyone have any questions or comments? Go ahead.
This condition then is going to follow all future tentative tract maps and CUPs from this point forward if this passes tonight? Or is this condition just specific for this CUP?
Commissioner Terracciano, I am not sure that you would have other conditions that would follow on this. Staff has looked at some time at modifying our municipal code. We currently allow, excuse me, conditional use permits that are filed on residential projects and maps that are filed in conjunction with that to have coterminous expiration dates. But at the present time, that same sort of language does not exist for commercial or industrial projects that may also have a map filed with them. What that does is it creates the potential for having a couple of entitlements, each one with varying expiration dates. So we would look to, in fact, we expect to bring before you sometime in the next couple of months language that would modify the applicable provisions of the municipal code to deal with that. If that is the case, and we had future commercial or industrial projects in which there was a conditional use permit and a map, or even a site plan review, which is a staff level review and approval and a map, the language of the municipal code would allow for those dates, those expiration dates, to be coterminous. So this particular condition, however, is necessary for this particular case because the applicant has indicated that they have an intent to file a map, but as has been noted in the response to Chairman Vos, they have not at this time filed a map on this particular site. And the purpose for the condition was to lay out the requirements if they were to take advantage of some kind of coterminous expiration date, what would need to happen for that to occur.
If the tentative map is submitted before the expiration date in September of 2014, does that mean that the CUP will be continued for 3 years, or will it just be year to year?
If you approve the extension on the CUP this evening, its expiration date would go, as was noted, to September 11th of 2014. If the city amends the municipal code, as we're looking at bringing forward to you, and that language is then in place, whenever the applicant, if they file a tentative map and that tentative map is approved prior to the expiration of the conditional use permit, the Planning Commission can, by virtue of the conditions that would be approved on that map, create a coterminous expiration date for the conditional use permit. But that would be dependent on those particular things happening. But to give you an example, let's suppose that they were to have a map approved in March of 2014. Normally, that approval would be for a map expiration date of March 2016. What could happen under the provisions of this condition, assuming that the conditions as required under the tentative map are also written this way, the CUP could be automatically given an expiration date that would be coterminous with the map, in other words, March of 2016.
That makes it much clearer in my mind. When are we going to be visiting municipal code modifications?
Yes, actually, the city attorney's office has at the point of initiating work on this, and I would expect within 2 to 3 months that there will be some kind of draft in front of you in regards to that language.
Thank you. No more questions.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So it wouldn't be grandfathered in, we would meet, or it would become an agendized item again that would be revisited? So
Yes.
it wouldn't grandfather 3 years?
No.
Okay, thank you.
You would have to specifically approve that as a condition of the map.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments? Visiting modified, or the new condition 73, which is a replacement of 2, right? Did I get that right? In our staff report on page 3, at the top of the page, it talks about modifications to the plan, meeting the development plan for this particular project, I'm assuming, including timing of on- and off-site improvements that do not raise significant new issues or extend the overall time frame beyond the approval period, may be approved by the planning director. So, would you define for us, please, that, quote, that do not rise or raise significant new issues, or close quote?
Okay. The first, or actually I'll take the second phrase first, as far as extending the overall time frame, that's clarity that as the director of planning, I don't have the authority to just unilaterally extend the time of a CUP. So that states that, I can't do that through an administrative function. This is a typical type of test that we put on the use of conditional use permits or modifications to them. And we look at several different things. We look at, number one, access to the site. Do the changes that are being proposed to the site plan change the points of access, and is that change significant in terms of traffic flow or safety? We look at overall square footage. Does the revised plan indicate an increase in square footage that would significantly affect findings that were made or requirements that were put in place to deal with traffic or pedestrian or bicyclist safety? We take a look at whether or not the orientation of the buildings, in other words, distances from property lines, change something or are a reduction in a requirement that may have been put in place to address a public concern that was raised at the hearing. So what we do is we allow flexibility so that there is some administrative leeway in how plans are laid out, but we try to make sure that those changes don't alter in any significant sense what the Planning Commission approved, or in this case, it was the City Council that approved the conditional use permit.
So the note in condition 73, which we have seen before in all conditional use permits, I believe, still stands, and it talks about the typical entitlement of a conditional use permit, which is requires the slab of the major building would be a typical requirement, and inspection to consider the permit used. But for a project of this size, how would you define use, or can you define use, I should say?
The language out of the municipal code is to the effect that a conditional use permit is considered used when development that is authorized by it occurs. The reason that we have used the standard in general that you see here is that's what the courts in California have generally used as a test for what is a vested right. In other words, when has an applicant done significant investment in reliance on a permit, and at that point, where have the courts said that you as a public agency, city, cannot pull that approval back from them? So that's why we use that as the general test. But the city, recognizes that there are differences between projects and size and even phasing of how they occur. So we would look at that carefully in that situation. It's ultimately the determination of the staff. Initially, we may rely on the city attorney's expertise if there is a question. Like all staff determinations, that is appealable, whether by the applicant or by a member of the public if they feel that that determination is not correct.
Very good, thank you. Just as a reminder, and without looking at the 200 pages of project that we looked at back in whenever it was, 2009, there was no phasing plan approved on this project, was there?
There was no phasing plan approved as a part of the use permit.
All right, thank you. All right, then. Any other questions before we have speakers on this project?
I do have two speakers cards, Mr. Chairman. They're both representatives of the applicant, or the applicant in one case.
Well, they're certainly welcome to speak if they would like to. Could you tell us who they are, please?
Yes, I have two slips, one from Vincent Roach and one from George Lane.
Mr. Lane?
At this time, I would like to hold comments.
If you're going to speak to us, would you come to the microphone so we can identify you? Good evening, Mr. Lane, and welcome.
Thank you, commissioners and staff. George Lane, I represent the Frank and Bonnie Lane Trust, the owners of this property. And this time, if I could withhold comments.
All right, very good. Thank you. All right, and you had another speaker, Mr. Roach? Good evening.
Good evening, Chairman and Commissioners and staff. I filled out the card simply to the extent I needed to answer any questions or provide any input to the extent there was any needed. So, thank you.
All right, very good. Thank you. Have any other speakers, Mr. Ludicky?
No, Mr. Chairman.
All right, then. So, without objection, then, the public hearing is closed, and we'll consider a motion on this matter.
I move that we grant a one-year extension to September 11, 2014, based on the finding contained in staff report and subject to all the previously approved conditions, with the additions of condition number 72 and 73 and the modification of condition number 2.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion or comment? Please vote.
Motion passes 5-0.
Mr. Adams, you're broadening your horizons now. You're a technical, one of our electronic technical people?
My technical expertise consists
Wow.
of pressing 2 buttons. That's the
More than
extent
I
of it.
could do, certainly. Well, good luck with your project, and we hope it starts soon.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
All right, the next public hearing is conditional use permit 1307, which is the applicant, which is Spring Hill Suites. And without objection, the public hearing is open on this matter. Do you have speaker cards on this one?
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Anyone care to hear the staff report on this? Nope? All right then. So, since we don't have any speakers and we don't care to hear a staff report, we've read our staff report, it would be appropriate to close the public hearing without objection and consider a motion on this matter.
I'll make the motion. We adopt resolution number 13-07, approving conditional use permit number 1307.
Second that.
Thank you. Further comment or question? Please vote.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Next item is item number 4, which is a general plan amendment number 1301, zone change number 1301, and conditional use permit 1305. The applicant is Somas, and this is a project that we've had a modified recommendation to. However, we will still have a public hearing on this matter. So without objection, the public hearing is open. Do we have speakers?
Yes, I have one speaker card, Mr. Chairman, and I also do have correspondence that has been submitted this evening regarding the case.
Well, all right then. So, the public hearing is open. Let's hear a brief staff report, and then we'll consider the speaker's comments.
Chairman Bose and Commissioners, what you have before you today is a 92.7 acre photovoltaic project on city property, generally bounded by K8, Avenue L, 20th Street East, and 30th Street East. As a part of that, 3 separate developers will be building individual solar projects. However, mid to late last week, the city received substantial comments from one entity, and city staff is requesting a continuance to August 19th Planning Commission meeting in order to adequately address said comments.
All right, thank you. And you'll be sharing that correspondence with us?
You will get copies of everything.
Would this be a similar everything like we had last year on a
That would be correct, only slightly smaller.
lovely? Thank you. We have a correspondence from Ms. Eva Kovacs, if I said it right, which the commission will consider. Since the public hearing is open, we will consider this with all the remaining correspondence that we receive on this matter.
That's correct. I will provide you written comments to that also.
All right, thank you. Anyone have any questions or comments, or do you want to save them until the public hearing? Next hearing? Okay. Do we have a speaker, Mr. Ludicky?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mitchell Tsai? Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Yes.
Mr. Tsai, welcome.
Chairman Vosk, Commissioners, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak before you today. My name is Mitchell Tsai. I'm here on behalf of Laborers Local Number 300. Laborers Local Number 300 has members who live in the Lancaster area who have who live and recreate and work in this area and have environmental interests and are affected by the environmental impact that this project may have. Lyona supports the continuance because we believe that the commission that staff should take some time to take into account some of the comments that we submitted on this particular project. It's being submitted to you. In particular, our comments address a number of concerns that we believe that a mitigated negative declaration would not address properly. A mitigated negative declaration is a finding of the city that this project would have no substantive impact. This project is an almost 100-acre project that would that poses a number of environmental impacts. Under the fair argument standard, which is what legally is considered for a mitigated negative declaration, as the city was proposing before it decided to continue it. A fair argument is that if there's any fair argument that this project would have a significant environmental impact, the project should be subject to environmental impact report. In particular, we submit comments from expert hydrogeologist Matt Hagman, who is a former senior science advisor from US EPA, as well as expert wildlife biologist Sean Smallwood. Raises a number of significant concerns. Most importantly, they raise concerns concerning the release of hazardous materials from the site due to construction. Also raises a number of concerns concerning air quality emissions. In particular, the negative declaration fails to analyze any of the construction and air quality impacts that they may have. In particular, doesn't quantify what kind of particulate matter emissions might be emitted from the project. Moreover, it fails to analyze the cumulative impacts of the project, as well as the impacts on biological resources that the project may have. We appreciate and support the city's continuance of this matter. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Sy. The comments you just read into the record are on the cover letter that you've provided to us with this pile of paper?
Yes.
Which is, I recall you and I recall the names of your expert from a previous protest you raised on another PV project out on the west side. Am I correct?
Yes, I was here previously.
You look familiar.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you for being here tonight. There may be questions of you. Anyone have any?
I'm curious why the 11th hour paper instead of the 30 days prior that this could have been commented on.
Well, these comments were submitted on July 9th, which is when we received notice of this project. The closing of the comment period was on July 9th, which is when the letter was submitted. Sometimes some people raise the issue about, in particular, in this case, the city held generally when by the time the 30-day comment period expires, a lot of cities oftentimes wait a couple of weeks afterwards in order to hear this project. In this case, this hearing was set almost immediately after the comment period expired. So I think that would attribute it to what you characterize as the last-minute character of these comments. Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? All right, then. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Any other speakers on this matter?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I have a speaker slip for Nicole.
For Nicole. That'd be Nicole Parson? Must be.
Yes.
Good evening and welcome, Nicole.
Oh, thank you. Well, looking at your site plan right here, I'm not here for this, so it's lucky that I'm here. I see your problem right here. I think that you guys expanded the project by 52 acres, and that might be the chemical or that's why you're getting concerns from the community. I approved of this, some of my reports are backlogged, but I approved of that solar plant, that one, and maybe some other one close to that, but okay. So that might be the problem. If you guys take it down, then I don't think that you'll have that problem right there from Mr. That he just rose. And then also the biochemicals. I was doing sort of a study the other day on
Well, I was doing it actually on mongrels. Mongrels are, okay, so this is, you're not going to understand, but biochemicals, if, in New York, they said that a lot of people were having like lung cancer and some people were passing away, and they thought, okay, well, the thing about biochemicals, it's death-defining. So biochemicals are real, and see, if that's what happened in New York at the Twin Towers, then that sort of what it was, and sort of like a pesticide too. It's death-defining biochemicals. So, okay.
Thank you for your comments. Have another speaker, Mr. Ludicky?
Not on this item, Mr. Chairman.
Pardon?
Not on this item, Mr. Chairman.
All right then. Very good. So then, we will, from the members, do you have questions or comments? Because this matter will continue. We'll leave the public hearing open, so if you have anything you'd like to add tonight, you're certainly welcome to. No? Staff, do you have anything you want to add tonight? None? All right then. So, this matter is then continued, without objection, is continued to the next regular meeting of August 19th before the Planning Commission in these chambers. And I don't think we need to vote on that, but we will if you like.
You just, the consent method that you utilized is perfectly
All right,
fine.
thank you. Okay, the next item is item number 5, which is General Plan Amendment number 1302, Zone Change number 1302, and Conditional Use Permit 1306. The applicant is Silverado Power LLC, DBA as Planview Solar Works LLC. So, without objection, the public hearing is open on this matter, and we'll hear a staff report, because I'm assuming we have speakers. Would that be correct?
I do have one speaker's card, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. So, may we have a staff report, please? Thank you.
Chairman Vos and Commissioners, what you have before you tonight is a 254-acre photovoltaic solar electric generating facility generally bounded by 110th Street West, Avenue J, 97th Street West, and Avenue J8. As part of that project, 120 acres located more towards the southeast corner of 110th and J are currently designated as, I'm having a mental blank, urban residential and zoned as specific plan. That general plan designation and zoning does not allow for the development of a solar use, and the applicant has proposed to change it from urban residential to non-urban residential, and from specific plan to RR 2.5. The CUP would allow for the construction of a 30-megawatt photovoltaic solar electric generating facility in the RR 2.5. This project would be, I'm assuming, single-access tracking, but it could be fixed or dual access, with the PV panels not to exceed 10 feet in height. Perimeter roads would be graded. The pads for the inverters, transformers, and the collector substation would also be graded, but no other grading would occur on the project site. Excuse me. As part of the review, Avenue J and 110th Street West would be dedicated at 50 feet from center line, and offers of dedication would be granted for 105th Street West, 100th Street West, and Avenue J8. 100th Street West would be dedicated at 50 feet from center line, and 105th and J8 would be dedicated at 42 feet from center line. In areas where the project site is located on both sides of 105th Street West, 100th Street West, or Avenue J8, the full roadway dedication would be offered. Additionally, a 30-foot wide roadway would be offered for dedication along the southern solar field from 110th Street West to approximately 106th Street West, and from 105th Street West to 100th Street West, as shown on the site plan. This would allow access to those properties in the area that are currently undeveloped but are not immediately adjacent to a roadway. A generation tie line would run from the collector substation at 95th Street West and Avenue J. Sorry, I got that backwards. It would run, from 105th Street West and Avenue J to the substation. This gen tie line would either run in the city's right-of-way, or it would be located on the developer's private property immediately adjacent to the city right-of-way. 2 master plan of drainage facilities are proposed to run through portions of the project site, and these would be dedicated, offers of dedication would be provided to the city. These facilities would run along Avenue J4 from 110th Street West and connect to the second facility around 103rd Street West. The dedication would be approximately 50 feet wide. The proposed project has the potential to impact views from the surrounding areas and nearby residences. As these panels are approximately 10 feet tall, they would be noticeable, but they would not obstruct views of the surrounding areas and the scenic vistas. Additionally, the project site would be landscaped and fenced around the entire perimeter. The proposed project would generate environmental impacts during construction with respect to biological resources, geology and soils, hazards and hazardous materials, and noise. Specifically, the proposed project does have the potential to impact burrowing owl habitat, even though no burrowing owls were identified on the project site. Mitigation measures have been identified to ensure no burrowing owls are present prior to the start of construction. With respect to geology and soils, construction activities has the potential to generate dust. Mitigation measures have been included in the initial study and as conditions of approval for the project that require the applicant to comply with Rule 403 and submit a dust control plan. The measures that were included in your initial study are identical to those measures requested by the Air District. With respect to hazards and hazardous materials, there are 3 potential water wells on the site. It's kind of iffy as to whether they're on or off. If the wells are located on the site and the applicant is going to use them, they may remain open. However, if the wells are not going to be utilized, they need to be closed in accordance with all regulations. Additionally, noise could be generated to some of the surrounding residences. However, due to the distance and the mitigation measures identified in your initial study and staff report, those impacts would be less than significant. With respect to the letters that were submitted, there are 5 letters that were submitted in response to the initial study. The first being from Los Angeles County Regional Planning. They had 2 issues. One was the request of perimeter landscaping. That's already a condition of approval. The other was a request that they comply with Rule 403, specifically that they cease construction during high winds. That is already a requirement of Rule 403, which requires construction to cease when winds hit 25 miles per hour or higher. The second comment letter was from the Air District, and it was a reiteration of the conditions that they wanted included in the project. Those conditions were included, and so that letter has been addressed. The Native American Heritage Commission submitted a letter outlining the requirements for Native American consultations and with respect to cultural resources. Those procedures were followed and they were outlined in your initial study. So there's no specific comments to the fact whether or not they didn't believe we did it adequately. It was simply an outline of what they were supposed to do, which we did. With respect to the Regional Water Board, they had concerns with whether or not waters of the state would be impacted and whether or not permits were required from the Water Board. A jurisdictional delineation was performed for this project, and it's outlined in your initial study, and there are no waters of the state subject to Regional Water Board jurisdiction. Southern California Edison submitted a comment letter clarifying what Edison's portion of the project would be. Those clarifications do not change the initial study or the conclusions of the initial study, and so no revision is required. They also identify that the Vincent 220 kV line is potentially eligible for listing on the National Register. However, no portion of that project, of that line is actually on the project site and would be disturbed by the proposed project, so therefore there is still no impact. I would be happy to answer any questions if they have any.
Thank you, Ms. Swin, and there may be some. If we have any questions now, or shall we hear from the speaker? Why don't we hear from the speaker first?
I don't have a, oh, I do. I do have the applicant's representative, Mr. Chairman, if you would like to.
It's entirely up to the
Questions of
applicant's
him, or-
representative if he wants to tell us anything. Your name again?
My name is Garrett Bean with
Mr. Bean,
Silverado
thank
Power.
you. Welcome, Mr. Bean.
Thank you, Chairman Buss, fellow commissioners. I'm here to answer any questions you may have. We think it's a good project right next to the substation, so if you do have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
I have a couple of them for you. You received copies of everything we received, I'm assuming,
Yes, sir.
including the comment letters Ms. Swain just mentioned? Any comments on those?
No, they seem pretty standard, and I believe the staff and Silverado has addressed them through the ISMND.
All right. Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you.
Virginia Stout.
Ms. Stout, you want to adjust the podium?
Is it easier from the side, or? I guess, you can hear me. Can you hear me now?
Good evening, Ms. Stoughton, and welcome.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Bose and commissioners. Thank you for letting me speak and for having this public hearing. I'm representing the Citizens for Rural and Open Space, which is a group of people who are property owners in the area, and a lot of them are out of the area property owners who have become involved with this because they bought their property assuming that they would someday build there, or for other reasons, and are very sort of upset about the fact that the general plan amendment, which seems to be driven by solar people as opposed to the planning commission, which they kind of rely on, when you're making decisions on where you're going to invest. And they would like to ask for a kind of continuance, because we'd like to speak with the developer. We haven't had a chance to do that. We also have a report coming from a biologist who was unable to get the report due by this time, because by the time everybody kind of found out about it, we haven't got a lot of time. You have to really get on the ball, so to speak, and get everything done. 30 days is not a lot of time to get a lot of people, disparate people together. So briefly, I'll mention a few things. One, the Dark Skies Initiative. Street lights out there, perimeter lighting, the negative deck doesn't even mention how that's going to affect the dark skies lighting at all, which is very important to the people out there. Drainage, if it's 50 feet wide and 7 feet deep, that tells us that, the drainage is going to run off the hills. Where is it going to go if it runs out of there? We know, those of us who live out there, that in fact the rain comes down there and it just can really flood, and it seems like that's a kind of a vague thing. And we have tons of these little, many of these, and they're all of these solar projects, and they're all just bound by chain link fence, and not one of them addresses the other one. Like, where is your drainage going to go? Where is your wildlife corridor going to go? It's just that I put my chain link fence here, you put your chain link fence here, you put chain link fence there, and there's no effort, and there seems to be no planning to say what will be happening when all of these little places have it's like their own little world, and it doesn't operate that way. And it will, in fact, impact everybody who ends up having to live there. As we know from Quartz Hill, the flooding that came from the lack of planning on that. We disagree with the views. If you're coming off Johnson Hill Road, if you are looking from the Poppy Reserve, if you are looking from even from 90th Street, which you have designated as a scenic viewpoint, it will impact the view. You will have nothing but a sea of black out there with hopefully some kind of trees, but we don't even know what the vegetation's going to be. It's just going to be vegetation, and we just have to take it at someone's word. So it will degrade the character, the site, the hillsides. We don't know. The dust control plan has not worked. It is the same. AQMD says that they don't have any kind of a dust control yet plan, except the same one that did not work out at First Solar, putting water trucks, putting palliatives. And we'd like to see something different come out there.
Thank you for your comments. Your time has expired.
So that we could look at this a little better
Ms. Stout?
and make a good product. That's all. Thank you very much. I hear it's going. Thank you.
Ms. Stout? Ms. Stout?
Yes.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you very much for listening. I appreciate that.
All right, any questions or comments from the members before staff responds to Ms. Stout and whatever we may have? Anyone?
My questions were going to be about the drainage and the dust.
All right. A couple things I'd like to clarify, just for the record. The July 11th letter from Dennis Slavin over Richard Bruckner's signature from Regional Planning did point out the things that we've already mitigated, or at least proposed to mitigate in this project. However, I am not clear on the next to last paragraph, last sentence, as it talks about including coverage of all graded surfaces with 3/4 inch crushed rock to minimize fugitive dust. Is that in 403?
I don't believe so. 403 requires all graded surfaces to, by definition, be a stabilized surface, and how that surface is stabilized is up to the air district and the applicant. But basically what that means is no dust can come off of those surfaces during construction or during operation.
No, I understand that, and we've had discussions on this matter relative to when we had a presentation just recently from the city manager's office talking about fugitive dust and solar projects throughout the jurisdiction.
Correct.
And in some cases, we saw crushed rock in graded areas, paths of travel, if you will, where the trucks were driving, that sort of stuff. But regional planning is suggesting, is beyond suggesting, is asking this commission to impose that as a condition. So your recommendation is Quality Management District has jurisdiction.
Yeah, that would be my recommendation, to allow the air district and the applicant to work out a suitable solution.
Okay. All right. They also offered to work with us, with your department, Mr. Ludicky, to coordinate a unified effort, if I read this correctly, in coming up with workable solutions to mutual concerns. And I think, as I pointed out a couple months ago, the motion that was passed by the Board of Supervisors along these lines. However, as I read Regional Planning's letter, there isn't much different, very little different, in Regional Planning's comments than our own, and mitigations than our own. Would that be correct?
Correct. And I would also like to point out, Chairman Vos, that the City of Lancaster has been working with Regional Planning as part of the Dust Busters group, along with some of the solar developers.
Good to hear. Yeah, it's interesting when you read a letter, it doesn't really point out the history or background or the interaction that has either taken place or
correct,
coming to these recommendations. I had some other questions, and you know, in the regional planning letter, they talk about high wind conditions. Do you have a definition of what high wind is?
For the air district, high wind is 25 miles an hour or higher.
So,
And at that point, all work is supposed to stop.
okay,
Sustained or gusts
right. Okay, on that, I'm fine with that. The next one has to do with Southern California Edison. They did point out a 4,500 lineal feet of cabling. I'm assuming they ditch witch something out there and bury the cable, huh?
It would be along with the Gentie line connecting the collector substation into the Antelope substation.
So really, their letter is more of a clarification of the scope of the Edison interaction with this project.
That is correct.
Okay. So instead of one 66 kV pole, you've got, or whatever it is, you got two.
Correct.
Okay. I guess the one that gives me the most heartburn, because I have had the pleasure of working with various regional water quality control boards, are some of their comments. It seems to me that the review is a paper review without actually visiting the site and looking at the actual conditions of the real estate that's subject to this conditional use permit. That's my opinion. They talk about best management practices, and as I read our ordinances and our requirements from Public Works, that's a standard condition that all projects conform to best management practices.
That is correct.
Now, this is a new one. I had not ever seen this before, but this is like the capturing site run-on instead of run-off. I thought that was a good one. I don't recall ever seeing that one before.
Which bullet point are you looking at?
That would be under land disturbance. Wherever it went. I'm just reading off my notes because I didn't have the hard copy of this, and I read it from your...
Oh, yeah, I see what you're talking about. The environmental document should discuss mitigation measures to capture site run-on to promote groundwater recharge and minimize erosion.
And in the other breath, if you compact the site, you limit the percolation, and if you grade the site, you exacerbate the problem. So,
correct.
In effect, don't do anything. If you read Regional Water Quality Control Board right.
Well, and you can argue that, yes, we're compacting the roads because the fire department requires 90% compaction, all-weather roads. However, most of the site is not being graded. Therefore, it's not going to exacerbate a runoff problem, and it's not going to impede any natural recharge that would be occurring on the site.
Okay. They talk about post-construction monitoring, which I've seen before. Is there a condition to revegetate a site that's not vegetated?
No, we have no conditions to revegetate the site. The only condition that applies is the installation of 10 feet of landscaping around the entire perimeter.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the site is mostly barren, is it not?
For the most part, it was previously farmed, graded, disked. There is vegetation, but it right now looks like dried weeds. I don't know what it actually consists of, but it's minimal.
They talk about a detailed hydrology study on basin and reference basin 626.50. You know where that is?
That's part of the Antelope Valley. It also talks about the project site having minor surface waters and minor wetlands, neither of which the project site has. As I said, we did do a jurisdictional delineation, which looked at whether or not there were Army Corps wetlands, whether or not any of the potential drainages on the site, swales, whatever you want to call them, were subject to Fish and Wildlife or subject to the regional board. And it was determined that there are no waters of the state or the federal government on that property.
I would agree. and they suggest delineation of any and all potential permit requirements that the Regional Water Quality Control Board might impose when and if this project moves to that level of review. However, we clearly identify, the mitigation measures and the initial study clearly identify the requirement to conform to all the permitting requirements.
Correct. And if there are compliance with existing regulations does not count as mitigation. You have to do that whether or not the Planning Commission or staff identifies those regulations for you.
Right. Now, in the staff report, you talk about the site will not be graded.
With the exception of...
Pardon?
It says with the exception of the areas for.
Right.
That is correct.
And it'll be mowed, but you'll be mowing dirt out there, so I wouldn't suggest mowing anything, but that's my opinion. Where in the conditions does it say, does it repeat the staff report as it relates to the remainder of the site will be mowed to accommodate development, but the site will not be graded?
It doesn't, because that statement was part of the project description.
I understand that.
And we can add that to the conditions, but it wasn't in there because typically when I do conditions or mitigation measures, if it's part of the project description, then it wouldn't, it's just a given, that's what you were analyzing.
No, I'm not asking it to be a mitigation, because it's not a mitigation, but it's clearly an issue in the community.
It can be added as a condition.
Well, assuming everybody agrees, we could add it, I suppose. But is that given the concerns that have been raised, whether they be factual, valid, or anecdotal, I think from my chair at any rate, it should be it's a condition that you're now recommending on all PV projects.
Correct.
So maybe we ought to add it as a condition so it's clear to the developer who's sitting in the room. However, their successor, it may not be clear. And there have been occasions when projects transfer, and we wouldn't want to have any misunderstandings.
I think that's a fair comment.
So I don't know if it requires a motion or just a instruction to add it to the condition list somehow, so it's clear to the user and to the public that that is a concern for all of us. Any objections to adding that as a condition from anyone? No? All right. I don't know how you'll phrase it, but if it's exactly what's in the staff report, that ought to work, I would assume.
I can copy and paste it.
You have any heartburn with that, Mr. Ludicky?
No, I think as long as in whatever motion is made by the commission that the intent of adding that is clear.
Okay. All right. Any other issue of view came up, talking about 90th Street. This project is some distance from 90th Street.
This project is approximately 3/4 of a mile west of 90th Street. That would be its easternmost boundary. It is on the other side of the Antelope Valley or the Antelope substation, which would block, if you were driving 90th, the view from you being able to see a good portion of it. I'm not saying it's not going to be visible. If you're driving down Avenue J or 110th Street or even 90th Street, you may catch glimpses of it from 90th. What I'm saying is that it doesn't impact the views of the areas that are considered scenic. You're still driving, you're still going to be able to see the Poppy Preserve, the mountains, and it's not going to impact your view from your car.
All right, and the other comment was about dark skies.
This is right next to the substation. That area is already pretty bright. This won't make a noticeable difference. They will have perimeter lighting, but they are not adding streetlights.
It might even be brighter than our state prison.
I'm not even going to try and compare the two.
All right, thank you. That's all I have on this. Appreciate your responses. Go ahead.
The comment that Ms. Stout made was about drainage, that these are like hopscotch solar developments and that we're impeding the normal water flow. Just from my looking at the different projects, it seems like we've always taken that into account. Could you
We have, most of these projects are not paved, so it still allows, as we previously discussed, percolation of the water to go in, and it's not creating an additional source of runoff from the sites. The conditions for the 50-foot wide dedication for a drainage channel, that's part of the city's master plan of drainage, and it would be required regardless of what type of project was going in on the property.
That answers my question. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Okay, then, it would be appropriate to close the public hearing without objection and consider a motion on this matter.
I move that we adopt resolution number 13-10, recommending to the City Council approval of the general plan amendment numbers 13-02 and zone change number 1302 on the subjected property.
Second that.
All right. That's our first action item. Please vote. All right, and we have another motion to consider.
This one, we're just waiting for the results.
Yeah, final moment.
I move that we adopt resolution number 13-11, approving conditional use permit number 13-06. The approval of CUP number 13-06 is not valid until the effective date of the general plan amendment number 13-02 and zone change number 1302, with the added proviso that we add in the grading provisions that we talked about.
Thank you. Have a second, please? Thank you. Any further question or comment? Please vote.
This motion passes 5-0. The previous motion also passed 5-0. Just by way of information to the public, the general plan amendment and zone change will need to be calendared for consideration by the City Council.
Right. Okay. So that brings us to director's announcements. Mr. Ludicky?
I have no comments, Mr. Chairman,
All right.
or announcements.
Members of the commission? Comments? Go ahead. We did discuss at our staff briefing last week and previously on conditional use permits where, particularly in commercial or industrial projects, where the noticing requirement under the municipal code is very clear as in regards to notifying property owners, those owners in fee that are listed on the tax roll. However, there is not a noticing requirement for adjacent tenants or those who may be impacted by a use, whether it be sensitive or not unusual type. So whether, and we did talk about the section of the municipal code 17.306.020 sections A, 2, B, and C, whether it's appropriate for us to consider some modification to that for the city council's consideration or not. So I don't know if you've had a chance to think about that, Mr. Ludicky.
I've asked one of my staff to actually see whether there are any cities which currently have provisions similar to that we may be able to look at and perhaps emulate if they seem to work. In the interim, and in fact it just came up earlier today, we do have a case that is in a situation similar to what you've described, and we are going to inform that applicant that we would like to have a flyer hand-delivered to each of the business locations that are in that center as part of the effort to make sure that they're aware of what is going on. That also does happen to be a request for an alcohol permit.
So the flyer would be a replication of the notice that, so folks know when the hearing is and what the subjects are and that sort of stuff?
Correct.
Very good. I think that's what we talked about, so that's good. All right. I neglected to mention at the beginning of the meeting and recognize the fact that one of our members has resigned, Ms. Smith, and so there is a vacancy, and undoubtedly the mayor will be considering an appointment sometime in the future. Also, Ms. Harvey was unable to be here this evening due to employment commitment that she was obliged to attend to. So, at any rate, we appreciate Ms. Smith's service and thank her for that service, and we'll probably be ginning up a appropriate recognition for her, like we've done for other former commissioners.
Yes, I believe there will be a form of recognition.
Good. All right, very good. All right, this is now time for public business from the floor on non-agendized items. This portion of the agenda allows an individual the opportunity to address the commission on any subject regarding city business. Under state legislation, no action can be taken on non-agenda items. Members of the public should be aware of this when addressing the commission regarding items not specifically referenced on the agenda. Please complete a speaker's card for the recording secretary. Individual speakers are limited to 3 minutes each. We have public here. Do we have speakers?
I have no cards, Mr. Chairman, but someone may wish to speak.
And again, I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that our vice mayor is here this evening, and welcome. Nice to have you here. We try. All right, thank you very much. So, no speakers? Last chance. All right. So, we stand adjourned to our special meeting for agenda review Monday, August 12th, 2013 at 5:30 p.m. here in the Planning Conference Room at City Hall. Thank you very much.